Hi everyone, Dee here, and I'm in the process of editing the latest episode of our podcast, which is on assisted suicide, assisted dying. And I just wanted to jump in before you get into the nitty-gritty of the podcast that we do talk about things that might be a little bit close to home, might touch you, trigger you in some way. And just to let you know that support is there. We at the Naked Coach Collective are very happy to pass on any of the information that we got or where we got it from, get in touch, and or if something gets raised in this conversation that you feel you need to look into and explore or talk about or think about further. Sending lots of love. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Naked Coach Collective. And today we're talking, it's a topical debate today. So not necessarily related to coaching. We just find that over the course of our time together, we often end up talking about things that are in the headlines. And we thought it'd be nice to do one episode a month about what's going on in the headlines. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on the topic. So the topic tonight, it might sound a little dull and a little sad, but we hope to bring you just more insight, really, and information around the topic. And it's the assisted suicide bill that is being talked about a lot in government at the moment. And I'll be honest with you, when I first heard this, there was a part of me was like, this is really good. You know, I think I agree with this. And then you look into it and then you realize what it actually is. And I don't know if anyone else who's listening has looked into it and has had any thoughts around it. So immediately when I heard it, my thoughts have gone to something that I've spoken about with my husband. And that is like, I'd said to him, if anything happened to me, you know, if I wasn't able to walk, talk, or if I had an accident and I wasn't able to communicate, etc., I wouldn't want to live like that. And I thought this bill might be something along those lines, but it actually isn't, because the one thing about this bill is you will need to be of sound mind and be able to communicate properly your thoughts and your feelings, etc. So I think that would be a fine line. Anyway, that was my initial thoughts. Now I've looked into it. But before I talk too much about it, I'm going to introduce Dee and Ian, who are on with me tonight. The fabulous threesome that we have here every week. And now Ian's eyebrows have raised and he's slightly worried.
I beg your bloody pardon.
You love it, Ian. And what I'm going to say is actually we've all done a bit of research on this from different perspectives. So I'm going to ask Dee to sort of give you, I think, the headlines of what it's all about, and then Ian's going to come from a bit of a different perspective. So take it away, Dee.
Okay. So hi everyone. Being a bit of a details girl that I am, as Bea and Ian know. So what I've found is that the official title is the Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill. And, you know, we hear assisted suicide, assisted dying, and all these terms for it being passed around. And as far as I know, if you know anything about legislation or how bills are passed through, you know, there are a couple of readings in the House of Commons, and then it goes to a committee stage, which is where it gets discussed in minute detail. And that's the stage where we're at now. Like B, I had some incorrect assumptions about this when I started hearing of it being possibly brought into law, and I thought, and my feelings were very mixed actually. Unlike B's, you know, I kind of and they still are mixed, you know. They were mixed then, they're mixed now, but for different reasons, because now I know a little bit more about the bill. So, and I'll explain the reasons for my mixed feelings a bit later. But basically, the procedure that they are talking about is that you have the patient must have capacity, sound mind. Yeah, they must have capacity to be able to make the decision. Therefore, anybody with any kind of mental illness, dementia, Alzheimer's, or other, are out. They must be terminally ill. So they must already have a terminal illness, which is very likely to kill them within 6 months. And that for me poses problems already. I think if you were to speak to any doctors, and I have spoken to doctors who are they say it's very rare, or it's a very serious situation, in the sense that if you can say that a patient's going to die within 6 months. You might say a patient's going to die within a couple of days or a week or something, but 6 months is a long time. It's a long time. They have to be over 18, so it's adults. They have to live in England and Wales for the last 12 months. They have to be registered as a patient with a doctor. They have to have a clear, settled and informed wish to end their life. Interesting point. They can't have been coerced or pressurized into making this decision, so it must be made voluntarily. Also raises issues. Now, for me, those points are very, very subjective. So settled, clear, informed wish for one person may not be the same for another. And the pressure and the coercion, possibly, this needs a lot of thought. That's the thought. That's when I read the bill. This is what came to my head, was this needs a lot of thought. And the bill was only 40 pages long. So I don't think that's very long when you're talking about making a decision of this magnitude. Shall I go on to talk about the procedure? It's very quick.
I mean, I've looked it up, so I'm with you on the procedure.
Okay.
But it's let me just sort of I agree with you, Dee. I think what has been realised though is that it's not detail orientated enough, because it's now been pushed back from 2027 to 2029.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to take a lot of debating and getting wording and clarification really well on this.
Safeguarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The process is so obviously the person makes the application. Okay, 2 doctors, 7 days apart, with like sort of 7 days apart from each other, so not within 7 days, must confirm the person is eligible. That's the first thing. And the person then has to apply to the High Court for approval. And there is a 14-day waiting period, but they are saying that if you're nearer to death than that, then that could be shortened. And the person has to do it themselves. So no one else can do it for them. The medication can be supplied and whatever, but no one else can actually do it for them. Okay, so and the doctors get a choice to refuse to do it. Your doctor may say, I don't want any part of it. I'm not going to do this. And they have absolutely a right. And also you have to remember that doctors do take an oath of, to preserve life. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it begs the question, how many doctors are actually going to agree with this? And how many are going to be willing to approve? And the biggest thing is that there is legal protection for it. So people won't be prosecuted. Doctors won't be prosecuted if they follow the law of what to do. I think my other question that doesn't get answered here, and I think won't get answered until it's decided whether the bill happens or not, is what happens to life insurances.
Oh yeah, that's on my list.
Because I don't think there's an answer for that right now, and I suppose that answer may not come until it is agreed whether it gets passed or not, and then I assume that insurance companies will have to have some kind of really strong wording in their policies as well, not just not just in the actual bill itself. And the safety measures, what they're saying the safety measures are, which always make me laugh, is they must prove the decision is voluntary, which, like Dee said, is subjective, isn't it? How is that proved? The person must fully understand all their other care options before choosing this option. So the doctors can't present this as a first option. They have to give the person all the information on what their options of treatment or care or what it is going to be first. So this isn't like a go-to option as such. This is very much supposed to be a last option. And actually, a court or medical panel has to ensure that everything is legal and ethical. And they are talking about, if this gets through, there will be a specialist panel headed by a figure, and who is obviously a professional figure for helping the decisions to be made. So that's sort of the procedure, isn't it, Dee? I've got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I will just add in there, what I found really interesting as I was reading it was that you get your first doctor, the patient makes a declaration, and then you get your first doctor who does an examination and makes sure that all the criteria are met, the ones that I went through earlier. And then there's a 7-day period of reflection. And then when the second doctor comes in, if that doctor does not approve it and does not agree, then they can call another doctor. Now, if there is any doubt and a doctor is saying no for some reason, I find it, you can, to then think, oh, I'll just go and find another doctor who's going to be more agreeable, is quite frightening. And also I just wanted to, and they can only get a second doctor once. Okay, fine. That's, I just wanted to just define the difference between this assisted suicide or terminal bill and euthanasia, because people are more familiar with the term euthanasia, mercy killing, this sort of thing. It's been around longer. I think, for especially in my consciousness, I know I've heard the word for many years before. So the difference, as I see it, is that euthanasia is administered by a medical professional or somebody else to end a life, whereas this is the person is given the medications, the tools, whatever, to do it themselves. Am I right here? What are your thoughts?
No, you are correct. Yes, so the person does it themselves. But if you was to go to, I'm trying to think of a country that does it. We're talking like, I can't think. Is it Sweden, Switzerland? I could be out that wrong, but I know it's somewhere that way. Then someone would do it for you, absolutely. But what they're talking about, this bill is about you taking responsibility, isn't it? It's about you taking responsibility and having choice. And I absolutely advocate choice, right? I really, really do. I advocate choice for your own body in absolutely everything, okay? Because it is you and it is your own body. But I also think that it's just not detailed enough. It just doesn't have enough I don't think it has enough detail in it to be really clear. I also think that this is an awful thing. I was going to say it's an awful thing to say, but it might be that you don't like your family very much, even though they like you, and you might choose to do it as a way to punish people. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So your family might not want you to do it, but you might decide that, I don't know, they haven't been a good family and they might want to punish. I don't know. I just think it's open to so much subjection.
so many questions. It might be the other way around. Your family don't like you.
Exactly, and want you to do it. So it's like
Somehow
it's a really difficult thing to understand until you're there. I think that's and unless if I was in that situation, I how would I feel? I don't know. And I think that's the key point. And actually, Ian's done a little bit of research with a charity that's supporting this, and there's a couple of case studies. And we're not going to go into sort of like real detail, but I think some highlights from those might help us understand from the perspective of the person who's in it. And I don't know if there's any detail there from the families at all or anybody, loved ones around them. But I think it's one of these things that definitely until you're in it, you maybe just don't ever have a clear view of whether you do or don't agree with it. So Ian, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, just commenting on one thing you said there, B, with regards to you might not like your family or they might not like you, etc., and the decision being made that way. I think having the independent assessors kind of cuts that out, in my opinion, in terms of regardless of whether you like your family or not, you're healthy.
Yeah,
you're obviously not healthy, but we're not going to allow you to commit suicide just because you don't like your family. So I feel like that bit would maybe cut that potential situation out. But just to give my kind of viewpoint on this before I kind of dive into a couple of things here, I came at this as me and Dee talked about this when we were discussing what kind of episode should we go for, and without doing any research, I just had a very high level, ignorant view of who are you to tell me when I can and cannot die if I'm so bad that I want to. I still hold that opinion, even after looking at everything, because in my opinion, who are you to tell me? But having said that, a couple of things to kind of go over that I've found, and so that I don't know whether they're a charity or just an organisation pushing in support of having assisted dying as a law within the UK. They're called My Death, My Decision. I'll just read a couple of kind of facts out from them. So there's at least one British citizen per week travelling to Switzerland for an assisted death. That's risen sixfold since 2005. The average cost to go to Switzerland for this assisted death is over £12,000. So it's limited to only people who can obviously afford it, and not the poorer people. There's over 1,500 people in the UK who are members of a Swiss assisted dying organisation. If you assist somebody in taking their own life, you can be put in prison for up to 14 years. So many people who are going abroad for this assisted death are concealing their plans from their friends and family because they don't want to get them implicated inadvertently just by talking about it with them. And so people are therefore then being robbed of the chance to say goodbye, friends and family. Patients are failing to confide in their doctors when they intend to end their life because they fear they could be prevented from doing so. And so what that kind of knock-on effect of that is they're less likely to learn about alternative treatments, what else is out there for them, and make a more informed decision. And there's a couple of examples of. I'll just read out two, and it's going to be very high level examples because to go into the details is just heartbreaking, obviously. But there's a gentleman called Harry Moore who fought in World War II. Lived to 102, and he failed 3 times to go through and like have it done legally, and so he starved himself to death for 8 weeks. There was a lady, I forgot her name. I'll get the name later while someone else is talking, but she had Alzheimer's. But before it got to, as soon as she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they're like, right, okay, well, we need to do something. I'm not being without my memories and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, it's not only that, but you lose your ability to do anything over time, don't you? So she wanted to go through this, but her husband really struggled with that decision. And so she said, okay, fine, and didn't go ahead with it. And then it got to a point where she was too ill to go to Switzerland. And then he was like, well, she asked him, look, can you please let me die, basically. He said, fine, okay then. Too ill to go over to Switzerland, and so, again, she starved herself to death. And then he then developed a heart condition and died. And the doctors said it was that particular thing. It's like a broken heart syndrome, is it, or something?
Yeah,
it's called. He basically died of a broken heart. But he said to all his family and everything, he just lived racked with guilt, having to watch her starve herself to death. So yeah, just awful stories. But just a couple more stats, and one I was quite surprised with. So 87% of the public favours changing the law. 88% of people who identify as disabled favour changing the law. This is the one that surprised me now. So 71% of people who are religious support changing the law. I was quite surprised with that one. I would have thought it'd be the other way around.
Surprised at that, yes.
92% of people who identify as non-religious support changing the law. 50% of doctors support it. And 58% of doctors believe that if the law were to change, patients with physical conditions causing intolerable suffering, which cannot be relieved, should be able to access an assisted death. And we were talking earlier about the doctor side of things. There's a stat that says 45% of doctors in the UK believe that healthcare professionals are already assisting their patients to end their life. And it's estimated that around 1,000 people are helped to die every year illegally.
Yeah.
In the UK. So there's some of the kind of stats from that.
It's that age-old thing, isn't it? Of law versus illegal. I think it is. So I don't want to go on to a different subject, but I've talked about this law thing and no law to do with prostitution, right? Okay, in the past with my husband, when you watch things, on TV. And I think this is in the same boat. So if it was able to be managed properly with all the right information in, and the highlights in it that we're reading out are just the highlights, and I haven't seen a detailed bill and nobody will get to see that, but if they have the right people making the bill, then there should be lots of safeguarding in there. But as going back to what I said, I do absolutely believe in personal choice, having a right to choose. Okay, having a right to choose for you. I believe that for every single person that lives, and that right to choose where you live, how you live, who you live with, what sexuality you are, what religion you are. I absolutely totally believe that everybody should be free to choose, and this is another one of those things. And by not legalizing it, you can end up, like you say, going abroad only if you've got the money to do it, and then family members not knowing about it, not giving that opportunity to say goodbye because you don't want them to get into trouble. And if family members do go, they're arrested as soon as they're back on English soil. So you've got that, that would help. You've also got the fact that there would be, like it would be with doctors, with information, with full information package. You know what I'm trying to say? So it will, I think you're right in that. I think it will cut out a lot of illegal stuff or people trying to starve themselves. I mean, should we really be living in a world where people are trying to starve themselves because they're so desperate to put themselves out of pain and agony? I mean, there's another question. Isn't that inhumane? And let's be honest, if you have animals, how many of us, and I've had lots of animals, have had to make a decision? And I know people go, but it's just animals. But to me, they're like my children. I don't have children.
Those people can piss right off.
Exactly. But they are like my children. So I would never take a decision like that lightly. But equally, I would never want to see anybody suffer. So I think, there are areas that I don't like about the bill at the moment. There are grey areas. There are things that definitely need to be ironed out and need to be looked at. Like I said, for me, there's two sides to the story, and 6 months is a difficult prognosis. I think what will actually happen I think what will happen is the prognoses will be much shorter with people making decisions. I think people might get a prognosis and then put it off, and then it gets worse. Do you know what I mean? And it reduces things.
I think one thing that came to my mind when you were talking earlier, and I hadn't thought about this before, was when you mentioned the 6 month thing, and I thought, okay, so what happens? And you have to be of sound mind and all this kind of stuff. What happens if, and forgive my language here, but what happens if you're in a car accident and you become a vegetable?
Yeah.
I know I wouldn't want to be living as a vegetable. I'd be like, take me out back and put me down, please.
Yeah.
That's a different thing, okay? Because on that question, if you're concerned about those sorts of things, being a well, healthy, young, or whatever age person, I believe, you can put your wishes, if you have fears of that, you can put your wishes in writing and have officially write, okay, so what kind of treatments you would want. So if this were to happen, if I were to have a car accident and my brain was addled, or my body didn't work, or whatever situation, you can say, this is the treatment I want and this is the treatment I refuse. You can do that now. You could do that tomorrow.
You can add things like that into your will. You absolutely can.
Yeah, you could.
But it wouldn't automatically happen if it would still have to go to High Court. And not under this bill, it would go under a different bill.
Yeah, it's not,
because at the moment, if you want to end your life at the moment in the UK, there's no bill that covers it, but you can apply to High Court and ask for it.
Right.
At the moment, without the bill being covered, you can actually, I'm not saying it will get approved or anything like that, but there is still a way of doing it. Now, if it gets refused, it gets refused because there is no bill that covers it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you mentioned about, you're pro-choice and everybody should be able to do whatever they want. I agree, and that's how I live my life, but I'm still really conflicted with this, because I just see the immense possibilities and opportunities for not quite nice people to benefit in some way. Crooked doctors who just sign the papers for a backhander from the family. And I mean, I know my brain just has gone into overdrive on the whole thing, because I think if you are faced with a death sentence, right, you've got 6 months to live maximum, you're very ill, you're feeling pain on a daily basis, and you're really not in a very well position, and your family hate to see you suffering, for a start, right? It's really hard to see somebody you love feeling in that sort of situation. But they may not fit all the criteria. And I would hope that there'd be a slightly even more of a tighter criteria here, that, well, maybe these points gone into a lot more detail, and that's what I'm sure the committee stage would be doing now anyway. But what I'm trying to say is, I see that there is so much opportunity for not doing it the right way, for people to misuse this, and there has to be such strong safeguarding in place. 2 doctors, I'm not even sure 2 doctors is enough, because the first doctor can choose the second doctor, and it's he's it's mate he's a mate he went to med school with, and they share the same philosophies, or I don't know what, but I'm trying to say is that it worries me. I'm terrified for where this could lead and how it could progress. Maybe then the next bill will say, okay, so let's just see if people are not happy with a disability that they might have. Maybe they can apply for it then. And where does it go? How does it, it could snowball into so many things. Oh, well, actually, you know what? I just don't feel very well, and I'm sick of living, and let's apply to have this. And why can't they? Like B says, why can't they? They should be able to do whatever they want. But it doesn't sit well with me. I feel I'm a bit terrified of it. I'm a bit terrified of what this would open up.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was sort of thinking of the pros and cons, and I wrote mine down, then I ran a list. And it's sort of very similar, but there was a couple. So, personal choice and dignity is what we're talking about, reduces suffering, and it does allow people with unbearable pain to avoid prolonged agony without a shadow of a doubt. Regulated and safe, it prevents desperate people from taking unsafe measures.
Very true.
Respects autonomy, so recognising an individual right to make decisions about their own body and life. Legal protection for doctors, so they won't get prosecuted, and they won't face criminal charges. On the other side of so they're the sort of pros, but on the other side, the risk of pressure and coercion, I think, is absolutely quite at the forefront. And I think that's possibly the biggest thing in the bill that needs to be watertight, because that is the biggest thing that could be open to manipulation, or for vulnerable people particularly. Ethical and moral concerns, because of certain religions believing that life should be, and that would be difficult if you have mixed religion families, possibly. And these two, I think, are quite. Dee, you sort of mentioned one. Possible errors in diagnosis. Doctors can be wrong about life expectancy, meaning some people might choose assisted dying when they could have lived longer. And impact on healthcare. So would this move the focus away from improving palliative care and supporting patients to live comfortably? Because that's something that I think is always being looked at, to see how we can improve. How can we do it better? How can we improve? And would that stop? Would that just become like, oh, well, this is what it is, and if not, if that's not going to work for you, then you've got this other option. And there is a slippery slope argument that some people are saying that if we legalise it watertight to start with, potentially for the future it could be loosened up, and then would that become would that then be putting people at more risk? Like I said, I just found it interesting to run what I called the pros and cons to see how they added up to mine. And I think the biggest thing about this whole bill, the biggest concern that comes out of it, I think, is the risk of pressure and coercion, and making sure that people are of sound mind when they do, when they undertake this. That's a really important one. And then, like I said, looking at the other side, it's so inhumane it's inhumane to allow people to starve themselves to death. So if people are in that situation where they are going to starve themselves to death because they can't end their own life, even though they've maybe tried or asked or whatever, they are of pretty sound mind.
Well, that's the point I was going to pick up on, because it doesn't say anywhere that there needs to be a psychological conversation, with a psychiatrist or a psych team, if you like. And that would be interesting to see how that could be incorporated into it. I would just want to have
sorry, Diego.
No, I'm going to change over to religion briefly.
Oh yeah, I'm just touching on that therapy thing there. That charity that I was looking at, that was one of the things that they highlighted as a must that they've been pushing the government to include in it, is making sure that they've had the opportunity to have therapy and continue to have therapy as well before they make any decision. And I think just in kind of agreement with what you were saying, B, I think for me the biggest thing is the outside influence and pressure, and of being, of being sound mind. Of being sound mind as well. But the pressure thing for me is huge, because all it takes is a kid who doesn't like you, just wants whatever money you've got left for them, to kind of pile on that pressure, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, there is a lot of, I mean, because, you know, you may know my father at the moment, he has dementia, vascular dementia, and it's a process to go through to see if somebody has capacity or not. All right, so it's not a easy thing, and I didn't see that mentioned in and by capacity, you know, I mean sound mind. Yeah, what we So there is a process there, but I didn't see it mentioned anywhere in the bill. But I'm hoping that would be something that would come in the actual nitty gritty of the discussion.
I think I wanted, like you saying about your dad. So if I roll back the clock 3 years to my dad going into hospital when he broke his hip and then ended up 3 months laying in a bed, and we would nearly lost him 3 times. And he's still here now. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That's like, but actually knowing my dad and knowing that he also had to have a discussion with them about not resuscitating, because his heart is, you know, he's got vascular dementia, he's got Alzheimer's, and he had various other problems in hospital and went into kidney failure and stuff. So the point is, at that point, if it had been given the decision,
the choice,
he might have called it. Yeah, if he'd been given the choice, he might have called it that way. But 3 years on, he's still with us. So yeah, there is those, you know, those dark play. There are those things at play, but it actually took. I know he wouldn't have done, because it actually took him quite a lot to decide to have no resuscitation, and that's purely on the fact that his heart's sort of only less than 30%. So resuscitate, he would have a really poor quality of life if he did go into So it's just interesting, because like I say, if that had been in 3 years ago, would someone have talked to us about it, and then would he have mentioned it, and would we have missed out? If it had happened, we'd have missed out on 3 years of his. Well, at the moment, 3 years could be longer. We don't know how long. So it's interesting, because it is that thing where it says prognosis can be, you know, there can be errors in diagnosis, and that's absolutely true.
And I defy you to find a doctor who is going to put their hand on their heart and say, I know that this person has got this thing and they're going to last that long. So
anyway, I think there's lots of points being discussed there, and I don't think any of us are totally clear, because until we see a bill, and until we see real detail-orientated bill that has, you know, that really does take into account the risk of pressure and coercion, but also does take into account, you know, personal choice and dignity, I think it's really hard to have a final decision. But I think it's something that I think is in the headlines and is definitely being talked about, and hence why we decided to use it as our topical subject tonight.
Can I ask a question then? Why do you think it's taken this long to get to this sort of a bill?
I do not know. They've been trying to.
It's been
pushed for years and years and years, hasn't it? I mean, the last time it was discussed, was it like 10 years ago in Parliament or something? Was the last time it was discussed? So they've been trying for ages. It just keeps getting voted down as even a discussion point sometimes.
Why do you think that is?
Is it just that we're becoming more aware of options? Is it because the bills can be more powerful and more so they'll have more in them now than bills that were made? I don't know. I mean, or is it because we are an evolving race and maybe younger people are coming into Parliament who are more, aware
diversification of views, I think, helps the situation.
Yeah.
What if I throw it out there that what about the sacredness of life? Not even from a religious perspective. Just this is where my conflict comes in. This idea of the sacredness of what life, the purity of the life that we have, the living it through till the end. And yeah, there's probably a lot of cultural, religious stuff coming out in that. And that's why I totally, anything in my life, I'm always about freedom of choice. Do your own thing, do it for yourself, all of that. And on this point, it just triggers me. There's something there that I can't totally put myself behind it like you guys have and say, yeah, this is what it is. I just can't. I don't know why.
And I still go back to my original quote, and this is where I'm going to finish it, is that you won't know until you're faced with that situation.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I just think that is absolutely true. I have my feelings around it right now. Ian's got his feelings. You've got yours, Dee. But until we're faced with that situation,
you just don't know.
You just don't know how you feel.
I had a conversation with a doctor a few years ago who was a friend, not in a medical sense, and we talked about this very point. And he said the number of people who think they want to go until they get to the point when they have to decide whether they want to go and they change their mind is phenomenal. You just don't know till you're there. As this conversation hasn't been easy, and it touches on a lot of things. It may impact a lot of people who are in situations near there or there. And if you've listened to something today that has made you feel triggered in any way, there are speak to your doctor first if you can get an appointment, and
that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, or
there are lots of charities out there.
Yeah. So please and feel free to reach out to us. We can tell you where we sourced our information from. So yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone.
And this is just us doing a little bit of research so that I think we can safely say that we're all more knowledgeable than we were, because we all were just listening to what we heard on the news and the radio, etc. So it's just our take on things. It's what we've researched, and absolutely,
means no way is it conclusive in any way.
No. And I think the fact that it's been pushed back from 2027 to 2029 tells you that there is so many differing opinions on this subject. So for this evening, we are done. So let's go. It's the round off, guys.
Next time, be there.
Be bare.
And be naked.